Good morning, afternoon, and evening, traders from around the world. I hope you all had a fantastic week so far in the first week of 2021 and are ready to rock and roll going into week 2. First things first, we got to take a look at the bigger picture, see what's going on, see what kind of news is happening. This week we have some big news, kind of, sort of. There's not a whole lot. As far as the news calendar goes, we've got some news on Thursday, the 14th at 12:30. That's Fed Chair Powell speaking. On Friday, the 15th, we have at 8:30 core retail sales and retail sales. That's it. So this week, relatively light on the news calendar for large news. If we bring it down to medium news, we can see even then, there's not a ton. We've got some news on Wednesday at 8:30, the core CPI, and on Thursday at 8:30, the unemployment claims. But it's everything kind of coming in the later part of the week on the news side of things. So we'll kind of have to wait to see what's going on. But the news calendar is definitely bringing some interest in terms of what to expect, but maybe a little bit of a slower start. But now with that out of the way, we can dig into some charts for this week, the second week of the year from, let's see, what would that be, 110 to 116. Starting off on the NASDAQ, we have some very good continuation to the upside with buyers showing, well, that they mean business. We've got a really, really strong breakaway move. Buyers did defend off of that really deep pullback area. And now with a continuation back up, this kind of looks a bit like a head and shoulders. You've got a left shoulder, the head, and then kind of a wonky right shoulder. It's a little bit small. But either way, it gives you that breakout point, and the market is just screaming to the upside. So with this continuation up, it's more likely that we see buyers defending more aggressive pullbacks, likely towards those 13,000s. Maybe a little bit underneath it, more towards the moving average. But either way, not wanting to buy way up here, although might not have a choice, buyers will be looking to buy even small pullbacks at this point just to see if they can get into the move before it just keeps ripping through the top. Outside of that, there's some very obvious movement that's going on from a candle gap perspective, where there was large candle gapping here showing that there was potential for continuation up, but then there was more candle gapping all the way up. A lot of those objectives from earlier, we finally ran into those. Those are done. So realistically, it's just all the sellers that were trying to hold the market down are kind of out of the way, and any sellers who are coming in now are likely just buyers who are stuck. That's a great situation for a squeeze, which is why buyers will likely be a bit more aggressive coming into this week. Then over to the S&P, and I mean, obviously it's a similar situation. It's another index, but it's got some problems. There's a potential for resistance above us, although relatively unproven. And I say unproven because this is what the swing high it is that it's drawn off of. There's just not a whole lot of time as proof to show that that swing high is actually valid. So it's there maybe, but this could also simply end up being a channel, which in that case we're at the highs, near the highs. We're starting to get a little bit lofty up here. And it doesn't really matter which perspective you cut it from. The S&P is a little bit overdone to the upside and in need of a pullback. So buyers will be looking to buy the pullbacks here as well. It's still an aggressive bull market, so shallow pullbacks at first down to like the 3,800s. But if it can get a dip down to where the earlier trapped traders were in, the shorts that got just dunked, that's where it's going to be a really big point of interest to dip back and allow them to get out at break even and then shove the market right back up again. Over to the metals world of things, looking at gold with a big pullback to the downside, just got smashed over the past couple days here. This dip lower into the 1840s, 1820s, this is a big L4 dip that's looking for a continuation higher. Last week we were talking about how we had this wedge forming and then a good continuation breakout with a nice little gap. With that gap to the upside, we're running into then the top of the wedge, finding a lot of profit taking going on, and they didn't even allow the sellers a lower high of much substance before just getting dropped on. That's a big clue, because if the market does go back to the upside, it's going to be a situation that will be enticing for those earlier buyers who tried buying in for another leg up to be exiting at break even, right? That's their shot to get out. So if it's able to get a rally back up, this is the zone of support off L4, but don't be surprised to see a lower high with all of these buyers coming in down here. Some of these buyers down here might very well be trapped longs who are looking to average down and get out. I like this gold move, but realistically, it just needs, a little bit of a bounce if sellers are going to take back over. From the long perspective, this is exactly where buyers are going to be coming in. Realistically, the reward versus the risk is insane. The entry points are down in the L4 area if possible, with stops, arguably all the way down below the lows. Sure, you could argue that. But even below some of these other swings, just to give it a little bit of a buffer. Either way, the objective is still way back up to the highs, and even with this stop, it's more than a 1-to-1. It offers up a lot of potential here where a lot of different types of buyers are going to be coming in for different reasons, but all doing the same thing. And then speaking of other strong markets, there's crude oil just ripping to the upside. No brakes on this thing, just screaming into the 52s, almost into the 53s. Buyers are going to be aggressively looking for any pullback they can get their hands on. Beforehand, we were talking about how this 52 area, it's a major zone of resistance, and it will still likely chop things up a little bit. Realistically, though, the bulls are in charge, and I have no reason to disbelieve them. Even if they don't want to continue back up, and to be fair, it is very high up here. Even if it doesn't want to continue higher from here, buyers will simply just be looking to buy the pullback. So the pullback zone is going to be below the previous, last 4-hour bar, last daily bar, something like that, down in the 5150s to 51s. That's where buyers are going to start showing a lot more interest and potentially even back down to those 50s again. This level is certainly no stranger to crude oil. It's been bouncing off of it for a long time, and it wouldn't be a surprise at all to see it quickly flush back to 50 and then get another bounce off once again. Over on the euro, with a relatively large failure above that 23,275 high, they tried, but it didn't really... Well, it didn't work. So with the buyers failing that continuation to the upside on a lower high and then just getting decimated, sellers are going to be looking for a good bit of continuation down. But the caveat here is that they were looking to fill the gap, and the gap filled. And once the gap filled, there was a huge rejection. It wasn't like they were shy about being buyers there. It ripped away from that gap fill. And when the market returned back to that zone, it did chunk through it, but then immediately reversed back up again. That's typically a sign that there is some major inherent support going on. I do have another zone of support that I would much rather see down in the 1.21800s, but realistically, it just might not get there. Given the failures that we're seeing at these lows, as long as the buyers are able to stay above this, especially with like a weak candle looking like that, that would very easily drive the market back up towards the highs and try to break down some of this previous resistance. The next zone, if the buyers can't get the job done, would then be to dip back into that deeper one that I would arguably still prefer to see. But don't be surprised if we don't get that far down. Buyers are really trying to ramp this up. There's just a lot of falling resistance in the way that makes me pretty nervous to want to buy this early yet. Over on the cryptocurrency side of things with Bitcoin, strong at this point is just a useless word when it comes to Bitcoin. It's immense to the upside. The big thing that is making me a bit nervous up here on Bitcoin are some of these really heavy bear bars that are starting to step in. If we're looking across the way, where are we, right? Well, we're floating around 40,000. This is a huge zone of interest. And if we look at a volume profile in this area, this should allow us to see a bit clearer where some of this volume is coming in. And I might actually have to step that back just a little bit to encompass the first time around. There we go. There we go, and then it pops up. So we can see there's a gargantuan cluster of volume at 40,000. What a surprise, right? I would have never guessed. This is very typical for Bitcoin, where you'll see these huge levels of resistance stepping in at exact levels, right? This isn't like your normal stock exchange stuff where people will come in 3 cents ahead, 4 cents ahead. For whatever reason, everybody goes right in at the level. So 40,000, huge volume chunk once again. We saw the same thing at 30,000, at 20,000. All of these big levels are going to have big volume. But one thing that stands out is we're not seeing continued volume. They're not building the volume in here in a way that you would expect to see as a top. There's a lot of volume chunks, and there's some seriously heavy bear bars. But realistically, there's nothing screaming that there should be a top in play yet. That said, it does seem like there is a reason to believe a pullback is coming. The market is obviously very heavily overdone. We're seeing a lot of big chunks of volume, and the last time we saw that was around 30,000. They broke out of it, right? So that volume drove the market to a rip higher, and it acted as support. If we go below that to 20,000, which is crazy that it's still on the same screen, it broke above 20,000. And it still hasn't come back as support. Cough, cough, cough. Anybody waiting for a retest to 20,000 at some point? Yeah. Oh, you better believe I am. But where we are right now, we've got this this giant momentum to the upside. Big is an understatement. And the market is in dire need of a pullback. Where it is way up here, sure, buyers will be coming in aggressively looking for L1, L2 continuations. But the big dip is where it's going to be a lot more lucrative, a lot more interesting. And that doesn't start happening until retests of potentially all the way down to 20,000. Structurally, at least like 23. But 20,000 would be incredible to see it dive back down to even 30 because it broke so aggressively out of 30. But 30,000 already had a retest. So 20,000 just kind of hanging out there naked and waiting. A few stock setups along the way as well that are kind of creeping into interest. The first one, ATOM, with a very big blow-off move to the upside. This did obviously leave behind not just one gap. Right? Don't lose track of all of them. You've got that one, but there's also that one. There's a little bit of gapping going on there. Basically, this market is screaming higher and it's in squeeze mode. Any shorts who were in this market are getting absolutely obliterated, and buyers are buying basically every pullback. Aggressive buyers will be looking for the first dip back towards around 25 20s, 25 30s, or I'm sorry, 24 30s rather. A little bit of a dip back towards the 24 area to 23 area is going to be the big zone. Maybe a little bit of a flush back to 22 to fill in some of that gapping. Realistically, though, if buyers are going to hold this, it shouldn't break much below that before seeing a rally back up to reattempt that $30 mark and maybe even break out a bit further. The next one on the list, Etsy, ETSY, with a nice continuation move to the upside and creating somewhat of a super aggressive descending wedge breakout attempt or a flag breakout, whichever way you want to look at it. Either way, buyers are looking for continuation. We had a strong reversal off of the lows that pivoted the market all the way up to a new high. And as soon as it made that new high, it barely pulled back before screaming back up. The first time the market pulls back after that is usually where buyers will start coming back in again and attempting those highs. And what better spot than a big psychological 200 that the market missed earlier? It's an unfilled objective just waiting to happen. Etsy looks really, really nice, but these bull bars are fairly weak. This might be better to buy on the dip type scenario rather than buy high hoping that it keeps going. And then finally on the stocks, we've got LAC, and LAC is another really, really strong mover, but a little bit cheaper. Some of the other markets that we've been looking at have been on the more expensive side, but we finally have a really nice breakaway continuation on LAC, and it's breaking out of this consolidation that it's been messed up in for a while. Once it broke out of that consolidation, there's been a very clean path to the upside, and there's no arguing who's in control. The big question is we're at highs, and that's going to make it a little bit difficult for buyers to sustain bullish pressure up here. I don't want to be a buyer way up here. That's too much. I want to see the market dip back, fill in some of these gaps, and then find buying support down here instead. It makes a lot more sense to be a buyer on a dip with this kind of market, even if it's a dip below a previous candle, just to make sure that you're not buying the top so you're not the one stuck holding the bag. Alrighty, well that's going to do it for this week. Stay safe out there, keep those stops in play, and let those winners run. As always, enjoy. I hope you had a fantastic weekend or are having a fantastic weekend. I hope you have a great week ahead, and we will see you all on Monday. Talk to y'all later. Thanks.